I, Amanda, 32 years old, stood at the back of the elegant garden venue, my heart pounding against my ribs. 10 years of planning had led to this moment. My sister Rachel, resplendent in her designer wedding gown, smiled at her wealthy fiancé, completely unaware of my presence. A decade ago, she'd stolen my inheritance, destroyed my reputation, and exiled me from my own family with calculated lies. The evidence folder felt heavy in my trembling hands. In seconds, I would walk down that aisle and expose every dark secret she'd buried. Her perfect day was about to become her worst nightmare. Before I dive into my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey from rock bottom to sweet justice. Trust me, what happened next shocked everyone in that garden, and it will surprise you too. Growing up, Rachel and I were inseparable despite being 2 years apart. Our childhood in Massachusetts was idyllic. Weekends spent helping at our parents' furniture store, summer vacations at our lake house, and countless nights sharing secrets in our connected bedrooms. Coleman Family Furnishings had started as a single store but grew into a successful chain of high-end furniture boutiques across 3 states. My parents built their business on quality, integrity, and exceptional customer service. Rachel was always the more outgoing sister, captain of the cheerleading squad, prom queen, and everyone's favorite. I was quieter, more analytical, preferring spreadsheets to spotlights. But we complemented each other perfectly. While Rachel charmed customers on the showroom floor, I earned my business degree and developed marketing strategies that expanded our family business. My parents beamed with pride when my first regional advertising campaign increased sales by 30%. "You girls will make a perfect team when you take over," my father would say. When I was 22 and Rachel 24, our world shattered. My parents were driving home from their anniversary dinner when a drunk driver hit them head-on. Neither survived. The grief was overwhelming, like drowning on dry land. Rachel and I clung to each other during the funeral, supporting each other through the fog of loss. At least, that's what I thought was happening. 3 weeks after the funeral, we met with our family lawyer, Tyler, for the reading of the will. My parents had been clear: the business, our childhood home, and all assets would be split equally between Rachel and me. We were to run Coleman Family Furnishings together, each playing to our strengths. The inheritance was substantial. The business alone was valued at $4.2 million, plus the family home and various investments. The first sign something was wrong came when I arrived early to the lawyer's office and overheard Rachel's voice through the partially open door. She was speaking urgently with Tyler, asking about options to restructure. When I entered, they immediately stopped talking. Rachel's smile seemed forced, but I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia born from grief. Over the next month, strange things began happening. Financial documents went missing from my home office. Business contacts started treating me differently, with sideways glances and canceled meetings. Then came the rumors. I had been embezzling from the family business before my parents died. The accusation was absurd. I dedicated my life to growing our family legacy. One morning, Rachel asked me to meet her at the main store before opening hours. When I arrived, the company's accountant, 2 board members, and Tyler were waiting. On the conference table lay evidence of my supposed theft, doctored bank statements, forged signatures, and manipulated accounting records, all pointing to me siphoning nearly $200,000 over the previous year. "I didn't want to believe it," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "But Mom suspected something before they died. That's why they changed the will." Tyler slid a document across the table, a revised will I'd never seen, dated just 2 weeks before my parents' accident, leaving everything to Rachel with a small monthly stipend for me until I demonstrated financial responsibility. The signature looked like my father's, but something felt off. When I protested, the accountant revealed more evidence of unauthorized transfers to an account in my name that I'd never seen before. Within days, my reputation was destroyed. Family friends crossed the street to avoid me. Business associates blocked my calls. Rachel played the role of heartbroken sister perfectly, telling everyone how devastated she was by my betrayal of our parents' trust. The bank accounts I had access to were frozen. My company credit cards were canceled. Even my key to the family home no longer worked when I returned one evening to find the locks changed. I confronted Rachel at her condo, demanding the truth. For a brief moment, her mask slipped. "You always were Dad's favorite," she hissed, her eyes cold. "Always the smart one, the responsible one. They were going to make you majority shareholder, did you know that? I found the draft paperwork. After all my years smiling and charming clients, while you hid in the back office with your precious spreadsheets." "The will is a forgery," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll fight this, Rachel. I'll get a lawyer, demand a handwriting analysis." Her laugh chilled me. "With what money? Your accounts are frozen. Nobody will hire you once I'm done spreading the word about your theft. And if you somehow find a way to fight, I'll make sure the police get an anonymous tip about those prescription drugs you've been selling on the side." "What?" "I've never. It doesn't matter what you've actually done, Amanda. It matters what I can make people believe you've done. The evidence is already planted in your apartment. One call, and your life gets even worse." I left town the next day with $743 in cash, my laptop, and a suitcase of clothes. As the bus pulled away from the station, I watched my hometown disappear, along with the life I had built and the future I had planned. Rachel had taken everything, and I had no idea how I would ever recover. The first months in Chicago were a special kind of hell. My savings evaporated quickly between hostel stays and cheap diners. With my reputation tarnished, job applications disappeared into black holes. The few interviews I managed to land fell apart when potential employers called for references. Rachel had been thorough in her destruction. Winter came early that year. I found myself sleeping on a cot at a women's shelter, where the radiators clanked all night but provided little warmth. During days, I haunted public libraries for their heat and free internet, sending out dozens of job applications daily. By December, desperation pushed me to remove my business degree from my resume and use my middle name, Lynn, to avoid Rachel's digital smear campaign. Finally, a small marketing firm took a chance on me as an administrative assistant for $11 an hour. My tiny studio apartment had unreliable heating and noisy neighbors, but it was mine. Every morning, I walked 40 minutes each way to save bus fare, often arriving with numb fingers and toes. But for the first time in months, I had a foothold. At Marshall Creative, I kept my head down and worked relentlessly. When the office closed, I stayed late, teaching myself new software and digital marketing techniques. My supervisor, Daniel, noticed my dedication and began assigning me small client projects. Within 8 months, I received my first promotion to junior account coordinator. The turning point came when Sarah Delgado joined the company as creative director. In her mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense attitude, Sarah had built and sold 2 successful agencies. She noticed my habit of submitting comprehensive strategy documents for even minor campaigns. "You've done this before," she said after reviewing my work on a local restaurant chain promotion. "This isn't entry-level thinking." That night over cheap wine in her office, I told her a sanitized version of my story. Something about Sarah's steady gaze made me trust her, the first person I'd opened up to since leaving home. She didn't offer pity, only practical advice and increasingly challenging assignments. "Your sister may have taken your past," Sarah said, "but she can't take your future unless you let her." Under Sarah's mentorship, I advanced from coordinator to account manager, then senior manager. My client roster grew, along with my salary and confidence. Yet trust didn't come easily. I kept colleagues at arm's length, declining happy hours and sharing minimal personal details. My apartment remained Spartan, no photos, no mementos, nothing to remind me of what I'd lost. Occasionally, masochistic curiosity led me to check Rachel's social media. Each scroll brought fresh pain, Rachel lounging on Mediterranean yachts, cutting ribbons at new store openings, being featured in business magazines as the innovative heir to Coleman Family Furnishings. Most painful were the marketing campaigns, clearly implementing strategies I had developed years before. now credited to my sister's visionary leadership. 3 years after my exile, I discovered Rachel had sold our family home. The colonial where we'd grown up, where our mother had marked our heights on the kitchen doorframe, where our father had built us matching window seats for reading, sold to developers who raised it for luxury condos. I spent that night methodically breaking every dish in my kitchen, then bandaging my bleeding hands in silent fury. The following week, a former neighbor emailed me photos of dumpsters outside our home before demolition. Among discarded furniture and renovation debris, I spotted our family photo albums and childhood mementos tossed away like garbage. The grief hit anew, not just for my parents now, but for the physical evidence of our family's existence, carelessly erased by my sister. The stress took its toll. 6 months later, I collapsed at work, hospitalized for severe exhaustion and malnutrition. I'd been working 16-hour days and skipping meals to save for an emergency fund, still haunted by the financial vulnerability Rachel had exploited. Sarah visited daily, bringing real food and forcing me to reconsider my approach. "Your revenge is living well," she said firmly. "But you have to actually live." During my 2-week recovery, I made a decision. I would rebuild my life completely before confronting Rachel. Not just professionally, but emotionally. I needed to be stronger than I'd ever been, with resources she couldn't touch and evidence she couldn't dispute. I began working double shifts, my day job at Marshall and freelance projects nights and weekends. Every extra dollar went into a separate account under Lynn Coleman, my protective alter ego. I started investigating Rachel's business practices, carefully documenting irregularities I noticed in public financial disclosures and press releases. For years into my new life, I had risen to Director of Client Strategy at Marshall. My emergency fund contained $48,000. I had a small but loyal circle of friends. From the outside, Amanda Lynn Coleman appeared healed and whole. But beneath the surface, determination still burned. Rachel had taught me patience. I could wait for the perfect moment to balance the scales. By my 30th birthday, I had established myself as a respected marketing executive in Chicago. Marshall Creative had promoted me to vice president, and I'd moved to a comfortable downtown apartment with a view of Lake Michigan. My professional reputation, carefully built under Amanda Lynn, was spotless, with industry awards and a client waiting list. To colleagues and friends, I appeared successful and content, if somewhat private about my past. Fate intervened during an industry conference in Boston. At the hotel bar, I overheard a familiar laugh. Melanie Wilson, daughter of my parents' best friends and Rachel's former maid of honor. Instinctively, I angled away, but Melanie had already spotted me. Her cocktail glass froze halfway to her lips. "Amanda? Amanda Coleman? My God, we thought you were dead." The words hit like a physical blow. "Dead?" Melanie explained that Rachel had told everyone I died 3 years earlier. A drug overdose in some nameless city, the tragic end to my downward spiral after the embezzlement scandal. According to Rachel, she'd privately handled my cremation, too ashamed of my choices to hold a public service. This third betrayal, erasing not just my reputation and inheritance, but my very existence, ignited something cold and clarifying within me. Over drinks that became dinner, Melanie filled in the gaps of the past 8 years. Rachel had systematically rewritten our family history, positioning herself as the sole devoted daughter who had valiantly stepped up after tragedy. My marketing initiatives were now her visionary strategies. My close relationship with our father was recast as troubled and distant. Most disturbing was learning Rachel had told everyone I had stolen from our parents before their death, money they had allegedly planned to donate to the children's hospital that had treated Rachel for childhood leukemia, a disease she had never had. "Something never felt right," Melanie admitted. "Your parents adored you. The Amanda I knew would never have stolen from them, especially not from a hospital donation." Melanie became my first ally, discreetly connecting me with former employees who had questioned Rachel's version of events. One by one, I conducted careful interviews, building a clearer picture of my sister's empire of lies. 2 months later, Rachel's engagement announcement appeared in the Boston Globe. Rachel Coleman, CEO of Coleman Family Furnishings, to wed James Harrington, heir to Harrington Real Estate Development. The wedding was set for June 15th, exactly 10 years after I'd been forced to leave town. The timing felt significant. Perhaps even subconsciously, Rachel had chosen the anniversary of my exile for her triumph. It would be her perfect day, cementing her social position and business connections. Unless I returned to expose the truth. I took a week of personal leave, rented a cabin in Michigan, and methodically planned my approach. I created timelines, identified key witnesses, and mapped out evidence I would need. This wasn't about mere revenge, it was about justice and reclaiming my parents' legacy from the daughter who had betrayed everything they stood for. My first step was hiring Detective Garcia, a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. His background as a former forensic accountant made him ideal for untangling Rachel's business dealings. While he worked, I consulted discreetly with a lawyer about the forged will and embezzlement frame-up. Garcia's initial findings exceeded my expectations. Rachel had not only stolen my inheritance, but had been systematically looting the company through shell suppliers and inflated contracts. The furniture business my parents had built on quality was now cutting corners with cheaper materials while maintaining premium prices. Environmental and labor certifications were falsified. The company's charitable foundation, named after our parents, existed primarily as a tax shelter. The most promising lead came from Thomas, the company's former operations manager, who had documentation of Rachel directing him to create fake invoices. He agreed to provide sworn testimony about the financial irregularities he had witnessed. Just as momentum was building, Thomas called in a panic. Someone had broken into his home, targeting only his home office. Though he had kept digital copies of key documents, the threat was clear. The next day, he withdrew his cooperation. 3 other potential witnesses similarly backed out after unexplained reconsiderations. Rachel's reach was evidently longer than I had anticipated. I needed to adjust my approach, relying less on witness testimony and more on documentary evidence that couldn't be intimidated. I created a secure digital vault containing everything I'd gathered. Financial records showing discrepancies, the timeline of my parents' genuine will versus the forged version, documentation of Rachel's false claims about my crimes and death, and analysis of how the company had declined in quality and ethics under her leadership. The wedding provided perfect timing. Public exposure in front of James's family, old Boston money with impeccable social standing, and key business contacts would create maximum pressure. Rachel had always cared more about appearances than reality. Watching her carefully constructed facade crumble in front of everyone who mattered to her would be fitting justice. I rehearsed my confrontation meticulously, practicing how to remain calm regardless of Rachel's reaction. I arranged for a lawyer to be on standby and alerted select media contacts about a potential story involving corporate fraud at a prominent New England company. I booked accommodations under an alias and mapped multiple exit routes from the wedding venue. As the date approached, I refined every detail of my plan while continuing my day job in Chicago. Colleagues noticed my distraction, but attributed it to an intense new project. Only Sarah knew partial truth. "Just remember who you are now," she advised before I left. "Don't let her pull you back into who you were then." With a comprehensive dossier, legal representation, and unshakable resolve, I headed back to the hometown that had once discarded me. The sister who had stolen everything from me was about to learn that some debts can't be escaped. Returning to my hometown after 10 years felt surreal, like stepping into a familiar dream where everything is slightly off. New businesses occupied old storefronts. Traffic patterns had changed. Even the air smelled different, or perhaps that was just the absence of belonging. I checked into the Westridge Hotel under the name Lynn Marshall, paying cash and wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses in the lobby. My room on the 7th floor offered a view of downtown, including the flagship Coleman Family Furnishing store. The company logo had been redesigned, but my parents' initials remained incorporated in the corner, a detail I had created during my last marketing refresh. Seeing it brought a bittersweet pang. My first morning, I donned a simple disguise, blonde wig, glasses, and clothing unlike my usual style, and began reconnaissance. The main store had been renovated, now featuring a sleek, minimalist aesthetic that would have horrified my father, who believed furniture should look substantial and last generations. Current inventory featured thin veneers over particle board, marked up to astronomical prices. I overheard a salesperson assuring a customer about sustainable sourcing, a claim Garcia's investigation had proven false. In the store's heritage corner, I froze. There, enlarged and beautifully framed, were my childhood photos with Rachel and our parents. A placard described founder Robert Coleman and his daughter Rachel, who now carries on his legacy of excellence. My mother was correctly identified, but I had been completely erased, or rather, Rachel had literally taken my place. In several photos, the girl clearly standing beside our father was me, not Rachel, who would have been away at summer camp when some were taken. This fourth betrayal, the theft of my very identity and childhood memories, sent me stumbling outside, gasping for air. For 10 minutes, I sat on a park bench, fighting nausea. Then cold determination replaced shock. I documented everything with discrete photos, adding to my evidence file. Over the next 3 days, I visited all 5 regional stores, documenting similar misrepresentations and collecting marketing materials claiming Rachel as the founder's only daughter. At the newest location, I encountered Barbara, a sales manager who had worked for my parents since the beginning. Though I avoided direct contact, overhearing her conversation with a customer revealed she was unhappy with recent company changes. That evening, I took a calculated risk and called Barbara from my hotel room, briefly explaining who I was and asking to meet. Her initial disbelief turned to cautious agreement after I mentioned specific details only the real Amanda Coleman would know. We met at a quiet diner 20 miles outside town. Barbara had aged considerably, grief and stress etching deep lines around her eyes. For the first hour, she asked questions only I could answer, confirming my identity. Then the floodgates opened. "Your parents would be heartbroken to see what's happened to the business," she said. "Quality gone, longtime employees pushed out, customer complaints ignored. And the stories Rachel tells about you, I never fully believed them, but to claim you were dead? I attended a memorial tree planting she held last year." Barbara became my insider, providing employee schedules, documentation of quality control failures, and confirmation of which former colleagues might be sympathetic. Most valuably, she revealed Rachel's growing paranoia and erratic behavior as the wedding approached. She's increased security at all stores and the corporate office. Changed all the passwords last month. Seems jumpy, almost like she's afraid someone's watching her. Instinct told me Rachel somehow sensed my presence. Perhaps Thomas or another contact had warned her despite backing out publicly. I would need to be more careful. My next step was meeting with Elliot Winters, an attorney specializing in estate fraud. In his downtown office, we reviewed my evidence regarding the forged will and false embezzlement claims. His whistle when viewing the complete file was gratifying. "This is extraordinarily thorough, Ms. Coleman. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on several of these offenses. You have a strong case for civil recovery and possibly criminal charges." While legal proceedings would take months or years, Winters confirmed that publicly exposing Rachel's fraud was both legally defensible and strategically sound. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. As wedding preparations intensified around town, I maintained careful surveillance. From a coffee shop across from the Rosewood Estate and Gardens, I observed deliveries of flowers, catering equipment, and a custom dance floor. Local gossip characterized it as the social event of the season, with guests including state politicians and business leaders James Harrington's family had cultivated over generations. My most unexpected ally emerged 5 days before the wedding. Megan, Rachel's executive assistant, contacted me through Barbara. We met in the business center of my hotel, where she nervously slid a USB drive across the table. "I've worked for your sister for 3 years," she explained. At first, I admired her successful woman entrepreneur, charitable foundation, all of it. Then I started noticing discrepancies. Donations announced publicly that never appeared in the foundation accounts. Documents I was asked to backdate. The way she speaks to employees when clients aren't around. The drive contained internal emails, calendar entries, and financial records Megan had methodically collected for months. Most damning was a recent email exchange with the Harrington family lawyer regarding prenuptial agreement negotiations, where Rachel grossly misrepresented company assets and omitted significant liabilities. The final straw was finding out about you, Megan continued. I saw old company photos during archive digitization and asked about the second daughter. Rachel claimed her sister was a drug addict who died tragically. Then last month, I overheard her on the phone with someone, angry about Amanda possibly causing problems. I realized she had lied about your death. This confirmation of Rachel's awareness sent a chill through me. I needed to accelerate my timeline. The day before the wedding, I visited Rosewood Estate to assess security. Disguised as a florist's assistant, I delivered centerpiece arrangements, noting camera positions, staff entrances, and the ceremony layout. The wedding would take place in the formal garden, with clear sight lines from multiple approach points. The speak now or forever hold your peace moment would provide my perfect cue. That night, I made final preparations in my hotel room. Evidence portfolio organized. Outfit selected for maximum impact, professional but understated, nothing to distract from my words. Lawyer and media contacts on standby. I rehearsed my statement once more, timing each revelation for maximum effect. As midnight approached, I stood at my window looking toward the family business illuminated downtown. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was this elaborate confrontation truly necessary? Would it bring my parents back or restore the years I'd lost? Then I remembered my mother's voice. Always stand for what's right, Amanda, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Tomorrow, Rachel would finally face the consequences of her actions. And I would reclaim my name, my history, and my parents' legacy. The morning of Rachel's wedding dawned clear and perfect, the kind of pristine June day that wedding planners dream about. From my hotel window, I watched the sun rise over my hometown, painting familiar buildings in golden light. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. After a decade of darkness, clarity was finally breaking through. I prepared methodically, approaching the day like the most important business presentation of my career. Shower. Light makeup. Hair styled simply but elegantly. I selected a navy blue dress, conservative, professional, with just enough formality for a wedding without appearing to be a celebration participant. The evidence portfolio went into a matching leather folder. Nothing flashy, nothing that would get me barred at first glance. As I dressed, memories of my parents flooded back. My father adjusting his tie in the mirror before important meetings, winking at me. Appearance matters, Panda, he'd say, using my childhood nickname, but substance matters more. My mother teaching Rachel and me to always look people in the eye when speaking truth. Their voices seemed almost present, strengthening my resolve. I took a final moment to center myself, closing my eyes and visualizing the day ahead. Not with anxiety, but with clarity of purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, truth, and honoring the legacy my parents had built. The Rosewood Estate and Gardens sat on 20 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds just outside town. In my youth, it had been a historical mansion open for tours. Now it operated exclusively as an elite wedding venue, hosting no more than 20 events per year at eye-watering prices. The colonial-style main house gleamed white against emerald lawns, while formal gardens featured stone pathways, fountains, and a pergola where ceremonies were held. I arrived at 2:15 p.m., purposely timing my entrance for midway through the ceremony scheduled for 2 o'clock. My rideshare dropped me at the main entrance, where a uniformed attendant checked guest names against an iPad list. Rather than attempting to bluff my way past, I walked confidently around the side of the property, where my earlier reconnaissance had revealed a service entrance used by catering staff. Slipping through a gate partially obscured by hydrangea bushes, I entered the grounds unnoticed. From the shelter of a decorative hedge, I observed the ceremony already in progress. 200 guests filled white chairs arranged in a semicircle around the pergola. Floral arrangements in blush and cream adorned every surface. A string quartet played softly. I recognized familiar faces, family friends, business associates, former neighbors, all believing they were celebrating Rachel's happiness while mourning my fabricated demise. Near the front sat the Wilsons, my parents' best friends, who had been like second parents to me. Mr. Wilson's arm rested protectively around his wife's shoulders. The sight of them brought an unexpected lump to my throat. At precisely 2:25 p.m., a murmur rippled through the crowd as Rachel appeared at the garden path entrance. Her gown was predictably extravagant, a custom designer creation with a cathedral train and delicate beadwork that must have cost more than most people's cars. James awaited at the pergola, tall and classically handsome in his tuxedo, the very image of old-money New England pedigree. Seeing my sister in person after 10 years hit harder than anticipated. Despite everything, a flicker of our shared childhood surfaced, Rachel teaching me to ride a bike, braiding my hair before school, the secret language we'd invented as girls. For a fleeting moment, I mourned the relationship that could have been, had greed and jealousy not poisoned her heart. The minister began the traditional ceremony as Rachel reached the pergola. I positioned myself strategically behind a decorative column, close enough to make a timely entrance, but hidden from general view. From my Bluetooth earpiece, I confirmed my lawyer was parked nearby, ready with documents should they be needed. A carefully selected journalist waited on standby for my text signal. The ceremony progressed through readings and music. James's voice carried clearly as he recited personalized vows about honesty, partnership, and building a future on truth. The irony wasn't lost on me, knowing what Rachel had concealed from her soon-to-be husband. From my position, I could observe Rachel's expression radiant, triumphant, without a trace of the guilt or regret a normal person might feel after destroying a sibling's life and lying about their death. This was the face of someone who believed they had gotten away with everything. Someone who thought they had won. A text vibrated on my phone. Barbara confirming her position near the back row, ready to corroborate my claims if needed. Megan's message followed, in position by the rose garden. Files ready. My allies were in place. As the ceremony approached its climax, I mentally rehearsed my entrance and opening statement once more. My hands trembled slightly, the first physical manifestation of the emotion I'd kept carefully controlled. I took 3 deep breaths, centering myself. The minister's voice carried across the garden. James and Rachel have declared their consent to be married. But I am required to ask if anyone can show just cause why they may not be joined in matrimony. He paused, continuing with the traditional phrasing that had given me my perfect cue: speak now or forever hold your peace. The customary silence followed, that awkward moment at weddings when guests exchange glances, sometimes nervous chuckles, before the ceremony proceeds. In that silence, I stepped out from behind the column, my footsteps audible on the stone path. Heads turned. A collective intake of breath rippled through the gathering as I walked purposefully toward the center aisle. Some guests looked confused, seeing a stranger interrupting. Others, those who had known me, registered growing shock as recognition dawned. Mrs. Wilson's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Robert half rose from his seat. And Rachel, turning at the disturbance, locked eyes with me for the first time in a decade. The blood drained from her face so rapidly I thought she might faint. James reached out to steady her, confusion evident in his expression. The minister faltered mid-sentence, looking uncertainly between us. I paused at the head of the aisle, portfolio in hand, and allowed the moment to stretch, let the reality of my existence sink in for everyone who had been told I was dead. Let Rachel feel the ground crumbling beneath her carefully constructed world. Then I took one more step forward, ready to speak my truth after 10 years of silence. "Hello, Rachel," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "It's been a long time." The garden froze in a tableau of shock. Rachel's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, her knuckles white against her bouquet. James looked between us in confusion. "I apologize for interrupting," I continued calmly, addressing the guests. "For those who don't know me, I'm Amanda Coleman, Rachel's sister. The one she told you died of a drug overdose 3 years ago." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Wilson openly sobbed, while her husband stared in disbelief. Rachel finally found her voice, high and brittle with panic. "Security. Someone remove her, she's clearly disturbed." Two men in dark suits moved toward me, but I held up my hand and opened my portfolio. "Before anyone does something they'll regret, you should know I'm not here to make a scene without cause. I'm here because 10 years ago, my sister stole my inheritance through fraud, destroyed my reputation with lies, and eventually told everyone I was dead. I have proof of everything." James stepped away from Rachel, his expression hardening. "What is she talking about, Rachel?" I removed the first document, the original will, certified by the county clerk's office. "This is our parents' actual will, stating their estate was to be divided equally between Rachel and me. I obtained this from county records last month." Holding it up for all to see, I continued, "Compare the signature and date to the forged version Rachel produced after their death, which conveniently left everything to her." Rachel's face contorted with rage. "She's lying. Amanda embezzled from our parents before they died. That's why they changed the will. She's always been jealous of me." "That's another lie," I replied evenly. "I never stole a penny." Rachel fabricated evidence to frame me after our parents died in a car accident. She needed me gone to take control of everything. I systematically presented financial records Garcia had obtained, showing the timeline of my supposed theft didn't align with banking records. Rachel's body language shifted from indignation to defensive as I laid out the inconsistencies in her story. "She's manipulated financial records of Coleman Family Furnishings for years," I explained, moving to the next set of documents. "The company our parents built on quality and integrity now sells inferior products at premium prices, with falsified environmental certifications and labor practices." James's father stepped forward. "These are serious allegations, young lady." "Yes, they are, Mr. Harrington. That's why everything I'm saying is documented and verified by financial experts." I handed him a summary sheet. "Your family might want to examine these findings before finalizing any business relationships with Rachel or Coleman Furnishings." Rachel lunged toward me, only to be restrained by James. "She's crazy. She's always been jealous, always wanted what was mine. Is that why you told everyone I died?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. "Why you held a memorial tree planting last year while knowing I was very much alive?" The crowd murmured, faces showing increasing concern and belief. Rachel's desperate gaze darted around, seeking allies and finding uncertain expressions instead. "Rachel has been systematically embezzling from the company through shell suppliers," I continued, presenting the next evidence set. "She's diverted funds meant for the charitable foundation in our parents' names. And she's misrepresented company assets during prenuptial negotiations." At this, James dropped Rachel's hand entirely, stepping back with shock and disgust evident on his face. His family's lawyer moved forward, requesting copies of the documentation. A voice called from the back, "It's true." Megan walked down the aisle, carrying her own folder. "I've worked as Ms. Coleman's executive assistant for 3 years. I've witnessed document falsification, backdating of records, and fraudulent financial reporting. I have copies of internal emails confirming everything Amanda is saying." Rachel's face twisted with betrayal. "You ungrateful little, I made your career." "You asked me to commit fraud," Megan replied simply. "That's not a career I want." Barbara joined us next. "I've worked for Coleman Furnishings for 27 years. Robert and Elizabeth Coleman built that business on honesty. What's happening now would break their hearts." The momentum had clearly shifted. Guests whispered among themselves, some openly staring at Rachel with newfound suspicion. The perfect society wedding was disintegrating before her eyes. I reached the final piece of evidence, the most personally painful but necessary. Rachel didn't just steal the business. She erased me from our family history. These marketing materials show childhood photos of me, mislabeled as Rachel. She literally stole my identity to create her false narrative. I displayed side-by-side comparisons of childhood photos with dates that proved Rachel couldn't have been the child pictured with our father. Mrs. Wilson nodded vigorously, confirming the deception to those nearby. And finally, I said, producing a small recorder, this is a conversation from 10 years ago, when Rachel admitted to framing me and threatened worse if I fought back. The recording played clearly. Rachel's voice threatening to plant drugs in my apartment, admitting to forging the will, gloating about how easily she had turned everyone against me. The younger Rachel's voice, cruel and calculating, echoed through the garden where her older self now stood in her wedding gown, exposed before everyone who mattered in her world. James looked at his fiancée with undisguised revulsion. "The wedding is off," he said flatly. Turning to the guests, he raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but there will be no wedding today." Rachel screamed, lunging toward me again. "You ruined everything. This was my day. Mine." Security intervened this time, but to restrain Rachel, not me. Her carefully styled hair came loose in the struggle, makeup smearing with angry tears. "You did this to yourself," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Every lie, every betrayal, every manipulation, those were your choices." Mr. Harrington spoke up, addressing the shocked assembly. "I believe we all need time to process these serious allegations. Our family will be investigating these claims thoroughly." To me, he added, "Ms. Coleman, we would appreciate copies of all documentation for our attorneys." As Rachel was escorted away, still shouting threats and accusations, the wedding guests began to disperse in stunned groups. Some approached me, former family friends expressing shock and remorse for believing the lies. Others avoided eye contact, perhaps ashamed of their role in accepting Rachel's version without question. James approached last, his expression a complex mixture of anger, embarrassment, and relief. "I almost married her," he said quietly. "Thank you for stopping this before it was too late." As the garden emptied, I stood alone under the flower-adorned pergola where justice had finally been served. 10 years of planning, documenting, and waiting had culminated in this moment. I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of closure and a weight lifting from my shoulders. Rachel's perfect day had indeed become her worst nightmare. But more importantly, the truth my parents had always valued had finally prevailed. The hours following the wedding confrontation passed in a blur of statements, document exchanges, and conversations with long-lost connections. As the elaborate flower arrangements wilted in the June heat, I sat in a private room at Rosewood Estate, methodically sharing evidence with the Harrington family's legal team. Their faces grew increasingly grave as they reviewed the extent of Rachel's deceptions. "Miss Coleman," the lead attorney said finally, "the Harringtons wish to express their deepest regrets. Had they known about these matters earlier, the engagement would never have progressed this far." Outside, news of the dramatic wedding interruption spread rapidly through town. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former friends and acquaintances, expressions of shock and belated support mixing with awkward apologies. The journalist I'd contacted was already preparing a carefully researched piece on the decade-long fraud, ensuring the story would be told accurately rather than through gossip. As evening approached, I stepped outside for air and found Mrs. Wilson waiting. Without words, she pulled me into a fierce embrace, her tears soaking my shoulder. "We thought we'd lost you forever," she whispered. "Robert and Elizabeth would be so proud of your courage today." That night, back in my hotel room, I allowed myself to truly feel everything I'd suppressed during the confrontation. The vindication. The grief for lost years. The bittersweet victory that couldn't restore what mattered most, my parents' presence. I cried until exhaustion claimed me, a decade of emotion finally finding release. The following morning brought practical matters. James Harrington requested a meeting at his family's office, where he personally apologized for his unwitting role in Rachel's schemes. "My family's investigators have confirmed your financial evidence," he said. "We've frozen all joint accounts and investments with Rachel pending full investigation. More importantly, we've spoken with the district attorney about the will forgery and fraud allegations." He hesitated, then added, "I should have seen the signs." There were inconsistencies in her stories, moments when things didn't quite add up. I ignored them because I wanted to believe in the woman I thought I was marrying. Rachel's public unraveling continued throughout the week. The Boston Globe ran a front-page story on the wedding drama and underlying fraud allegations. Former business associates scrambled to distance themselves. The company board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership changes and potential liability. Tyler, the family lawyer who had participated in Rachel's scheme, abruptly resigned from his firm and left town as evidence of his complicity emerged. The State Bar Association opened an ethics investigation into his conduct. 10 days after the wedding confrontation, I met with the Coleman Family Furnishings Board of Directors. With Garcia's meticulous financial evidence and Megan's insider testimony, they had little choice but to acknowledge the extent of Rachel's mismanagement and fraud. The company's reputation has been severely damaged, the chairman admitted. We need to take immediate corrective action. By month's end, Rachel faced multiple legal challenges, civil suits from James's family for misrepresentation during prenuptial negotiations, potential criminal charges for the forged will and financial fraud, and a board vote removing her as CEO of Coleman Furnishings. The carefully constructed kingdom she had built on lies was crumbling foundation by foundation. My own path forward clarified when the family lawyer's successor located my parents' genuine original will in a forgotten safe deposit box. With unimpeachable evidence of the forgery, the probate court agreed to rehear the estate case. After expedited proceedings, the judge invalidated Rachel's fraudulent will and restored my rightful inheritance, 50% ownership of the family business and assets. Rachel, facing mounting legal problems, attempted one final counterattack through high-priced attorneys, claiming emotional distress and defamation. The effort collapsed when her lawyers, confronted with the overwhelming evidence against their client, withdrew from the case rather than risk their professional reputations. In a private mediation session, Rachel finally faced me across a conference table, her designer clothes replaced by a simple suit, her expression haunted. The confident, manipulative sister was gone, replaced by someone who realized, too late, the consequences of her actions. "What do you want from me?" she asked hollowly. "You've taken everything." "I didn't take anything," I replied calmly. "I reclaimed what was rightfully mine, what you stole through lies and forgery." "There's a difference." The settlement negotiations were straightforward. Rachel would surrender her remaining company shares and face the legal consequences of her actions. In return, I would not press additional charges beyond those already filed by authorities and the Harrington family. "Why aren't you pushing for maximum punishment?" my lawyer asked privately. "After what she did, you could demand much more." I considered the question carefully. This was never about destroying Rachel. It was about restoring the truth and my parents' legacy. Justice doesn't require vengeance. My return to the family home, the corporate headquarters Rachel had maintained as her personal residence, was bittersweet. The furniture and decor had changed, but the bones of the house remained. In the back of a storage closet, I discovered a box Rachel had missed during her purge of family mementos. Containing photo albums, my father's favorite fishing hat, and my mother's handwritten recipe book. These simple treasures meant more than the business assets or financial restitution. Over the following months, I divided my time between Chicago and my hometown, beginning the slow process of reforming Coleman Family Furnishings. With Sarah's guidance, I implemented new quality controls, ethical supply chain management, and transparent business practices. Longtime employees like Barbara were promoted to leadership positions, bringing back the values my parents had established. The most difficult decision was determining my own role. After much consideration, I chose not to serve as CEO, instead creating a leadership structure that would honor my parents while looking forward rather than back. I would guide strategy and values while hiring experienced management for day-to-day operations. "Your parents built this business to provide quality and value," Sarah reminded me during a planning session. "The best revenge isn't punishing Rachel, it's rebuilding what she damaged and making it better than before." 1 year after the wedding confrontation, I stood in the newly renovated flagship store. The heritage wall now accurately depicted our family history, including both daughters and the true story of the company's founding and growth. Customer satisfaction ratings had rebounded. The charitable foundation, restructured and properly funded, supported genuine community needs. Rachel's legal consequences proved significant but not devastating. The court sentenced her to probation and community service rather than imprisonment, acknowledging her cooperation in ongoing fraud investigations. Last I heard, she had moved to Arizona, working in retail management under her married name from a brief early relationship. We would likely never speak again, but I had made peace with that reality. The scales of karma had balanced, not through my efforts alone, but through the natural consequences of actions built on deception. Rachel's house of cards had fallen not because I blew it down, but because it lacked the foundation of truth. As for me, I had reclaimed not just my inheritance and reputation, but something more valuable, my identity and the certainty that I had honored my parents' memory by standing for truth, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. What would you do if someone you trusted completely betrayed you? Would you seek immediate revenge, or would you have the patience to wait for the perfect moment of justice? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you found my story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share to help others facing similar challenges. Remember that sometimes the longest roads lead to the most satisfying destinations. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to vindication. I'm grateful for each of you.